I'd like to hear from each of you. What have you learned from Mrs. King that has helped you in your career? Tamika.
Whoa, what have I learned? There's been so many lessons. And, I first of all, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. And to Dr. King and my sister Jotaka, I love you so much. And I'm so glad to be with you. So I
And
think,
before you answer the question, Tamika, I just want to say to everybody, she just had a death in her family. And so
Oh,
let's keep Tamika in prayer. She came on in spite of it. So my sister, I appreciate your sacrifice. And if you have to leave from us, we certainly understand. So
it's okay. It's funny
we
because
love you.
I said to my mom and sister, I said, well, I'm supposed to be on this thing. And they said, well, why you didn't say that? And they finally hung up the phone. So they're handling it and I'm going to get back to them. But this is important. So I'm glad to be here. And thank you for the condolences. So, I think, when I think about the lessons, the soul of a nation piece is so important because oftentimes I sit with what am I supposed to be doing? What exactly is supposed to happen in this moment, especially when it gets difficult and you kind of feel like the movement goes into these lulls. And particularly while I was within the Women's March, I had those moments. Am I supposed to be here? Is this something that, we should even be doing? How do we organize with all of these women who are coming from so many different backgrounds? And it is the first time that I heard the quote about us as women becoming the soul of the nation if we want to see the nation become all that it should be. And so hearing that, I realized it gave me power. It made me really feel like I am doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And that as a woman, I have a responsibility to the rest of the world, not just our people, not just our youth, but to the rest of the world, to be a shining light and to ensure that other women are uplifted because we truly are the soul of this nation. But I know that not a lot of folks want to give us that. So we have to fight for our position and for that role. And so I think that's been one of the lessons. The lessons is that we don't get to retreat. We have to continue to push forward because this is in fact our job to make this world be what it is supposed to be. And so I guess that would be the big lesson for me.
Jotaka.
Well, first of all, it is absolutely an honor to be here with all of you, and especially you, Dr. Bernice King, and my sister Tamika Mallory. We have been in the trenches together for many, many years, so it's beautiful to be here. And I really, and to just really be in this space with Becky Pringle and Dr. Janetta Besh Cole and Ms. Crenshaw. I mean, I literally was listening and just capturing all of these gems, and it leads me to a lesson that I gained from Ms. King, and it is a quote that I often think about. It's the quote, and you talked about it already, Monica, is that struggle is a never-ending process.
Absolutely.
It is never ending. And most importantly, though, what she said was that freedom is never really won, and you have to earn it. But you win it in every generation. And that lesson for me is a call to action.
Right.
It's a call to action for every single generation to recognize that we have a role to play. I'm 43 years old. I'm aging myself a bit, but I used to walk around, and I'm sure Tamika's done it. I know other friends have done it before. I used to walk around years ago and say, oh, I wish I was born sometime like 1940, 1930, because I would have been in my 20s in the height of the civil rights movement. I was born out of my time. I should have been born then. But when I think about this powerful lesson that Miss Coretta Scott King has taught us, is that actually, Jotaka, you were born exactly when you were supposed to be born, because there is work for you to do in your generation, that the baton is forever passed on, and it is up for us to recognize that while we must always honor and we must pay homage to the legacy that came before us, it is important for us to recognize that it is not there just for us to just pay homage to, but to learn from and to carry on. And that's a real powerful lesson, is for us not to just sit around and just think, oh, I was born out of my time. I should have been at the March on Washington. No, actually, I should have been planning the Women's March, or I should have been planning the March for Jobs and Freedom in 2010, or I should have been marching and fighting for voting rights in 2022, because we still have these struggles and these fights. And so that's an important lesson. And the second thing that I would say, and I've heard women who have poured into me and mentored me, such as Mignon Moore and Donna Brazil, talk about how Mrs. King poured into them. And this notion, and Mignon Moore talks about this often, to lift as you climb. And they always talk about how Miss King would sit with them, would talk to them, and would pour into them. And that's also a powerful lesson, that as we grow, as we move through movements or whatever we're doing, that is important for us to understand the importance of lifting as we climb, because it goes back to that notion of that important lesson that freedom is won in every generation. And we have to pour into the next generation and ensure that they're prepared and that they have not only the resources and the knowledges, but the tools and inspiration and support to lead in the manner in which we need in order to get free, because it's a constant struggle.
Dr. King, you have a very, how shall I say, you have a double vision when it comes to Mrs. Coretta Scott King, as your mother, but also as an example of someone who builds a legacy. What did you learn from your mother on both fronts?
Well, it's easy to kind of reconcile it because what you see is what you get. She was very consistent personally and publicly. No pretension there. And I appreciate what both of my sisters have said and who they are in these times, because Jotaka is right. We are here, each one of us are here at the designated time God would have us here. And I often explain to people that the quote that Jotaka mentioned about struggle being a never-ending process, freedom never being won, and earning it and winning it in every generation, it means that every generation is called to the freedom struggle. No generation is exempt. Now, individuals may want to say, hey, I opt out. But the generation is never exempt, because each generation is called to make their contribution to this ongoing freedom struggle, to help to preserve and preserve the freedoms that we have gained and advance further. But when I think about my mom, I mean, to be able to see a woman who was the picture of, on the display of hope, determination, and resilience. I remember her specifically saying to me on a number of occasions, baby, the darkest hour is always before the dawn. What she helped me to understand is that in this world, we're going to go to some dark places. It's going to get very challenging. It's going to look like our back is against the wall. And it's very easy to feel like you're helpless and to lose a sense of hope. But she assured me that no matter how dark it gets, there's going to be a daybreak. There's going to be a dawn. And so we have to continue to move forward. We have to continue to work, because the beauty of it is that we have a constant companion in God. And God's aligned with the work that we're doing. God's aligned with good, and God's aligned with what's just, and God's aligned with what's right. And as we stay in the vein of that and in the flow of that, there will become those kairos moments, which means it's not something you can calculate on the exact clock, the time. It's going to happen on May the 1st at 9:00. But you can be assured that on the calendar of the universe that God controls, that he's going to intersect with our efforts, and there's going to be an acceleration. We just don't know when it happens. So that's why we cannot stop and we cannot give up. And so that's what I learned from her, that you just have to keep moving forward, because as you do that, the work and the faith that you have, he is going to meet us in the midst of that. And we're going to make the progress. But we can't just sit back and say, well, we're just going to wait on time. We have to do the work, because God has to work through human vessels.
I'm gonna read another quote of your mom's that I think is really appropriate. To me, the beloved community is a realistic vision of an achievable society, one in which problems and conflict exist, but are resolved peacefully and without bitterness. In the beloved community, caring and compassion drive political policies that support the worldwide elimination of poverty and hunger and all forms of bigotry and violence. The beloved community is a state of heart and mind, a spirit of hope and goodwill that transcends all boundaries and barriers and embraces all creation. Why can we not get to her definition? Who would like to go first? And how can we get to her definition?
Uh-oh.
Dr. King?
Why can't we get there?
Why can't we get there?
Well, part of it is we have not been exposed to it. We have not been educated about it. A lot of people haven't heard what you just said. But even as they hear that, we can't get there because, number one, there's not enough energy focused in getting us there. You have to have, without a vision, the people perish. If we don't have a collective vision of where we're going collectively, not only will we take a lot of different routes, we'll end up at a lot of different destinations. And so the first thing is we got to get clarity on that vision. I think the second reason is something that my father said. He said that the tragedy still of human history is that the children of darkness are often more determined and zealous than the children of light. As much good as those of us of light, those of us who stand in the pathway of pushing for justice are doing, there is this lack of energy and focus and zeal and strategy and coordination and connection that is happening at the same level that those who are doing the works of darkness. And so I believe that we have to figure out how to better strategize, coordinate, connect, and get some of the egos that we have in our community out of the way, because that's been one of the real struggles through centuries. I mean, this was happening in my daddy's time. It's been our serious struggle. But I think, because I'm seeing it, I'm seeing something emerging. It's not quite there yet, but I'm seeing something that's emerging that is going to break us out of some of that. But that's one of the reasons that I believe is that there's just, let me tell you, people who do evil works, they work overtime. Overtime. Sometimes I wonder if they sleep.
Well, they have
Jotaka?
Jotaka, I was going to say there's a schedule. They're on a schedule. There's folks that's up in the day, folks that are up at night. They have a 24-hour schedule. And I know that because during the time that we were organizing the Women's March and other major efforts that I've been involved in, we can tell just by the energy of what happens on the internet, how determined and how well they are resourced and how well their messaging is. It is relentless. And where we might go to bed at, say, 11 or 12 o'clock, or try to go and have family time and do some of those things, they have another schedule, another group of individuals and apparatus that is in place that continues to work towards misinformation. It continues to work towards demonizing and being divisive within our groups and in our space. And I wanted to just give my two cents on the issue of why we can't get there. I think it's so important that Mrs. King said there's conflict that can be there, but there are ways to deal with it, right? So I think that one of the reasons why we are struggling with getting to this place, this beloved community in the way in which she described, is that so many of us are afraid of conflict. And we, as soon as we hear and see that someone doesn't agree or that we are all not moving exactly the same, for a lot of us, we're sensitive in that it's like it's over. The whole thing has been blown up. people can't work together because, you know, I don't like who you associate with, or I'm afraid it's going to cause me to lose my funding if I'm friends with you, and then I can't be seen in this room. And I think the plan should be to walk down this street, and you're trying to, and we have a struggle, a hard time being able to work through that conflict. And as you said, Dr. King, putting those egos to the side, where each one of us won't win every battle. Sometimes we have to be willing to take the leadership of others who may be in the room, whether they be the younger people, the newer people, the more radical folks that come to the table. Maybe it's those who are more seasoned and have a real understanding of the path that should be taken. We have to figure out how to be able to work through conflict and to be able to find, or at least to stay committed to the idea that even when we don't agree, our mission is too important to retreat because we don't get along or because we don't see eye to eye. So I think that is one of the biggest things that holds us back from reaching that place and really just aspiring to be in that place, because we're locked into our own emotional feelings and how we show up in spaces. We're too inflexible, in my judgment.
That's quite good. I have to ask our strategist, who's on our panel, how do we get past this, Jotaka? What do we need to do?
Well, I agree with everything that Dr. King and Tamika shared. I think also taking a step back, that one of the barriers to getting to the beloved community is just the idea of believing and knowing that we can actually embrace and get there. If you don't even believe that that can actually exist, then we're never going to get there. And I think that's a part of a barrier that we have to overcome. We have to be able to visualize and to wholeheartedly believe that it's possible. Because if you don't believe that it's possible, then you're not going to do the work to actually get there. And I think that is something that we struggle with. We struggle with people actually believing that we can actually get to a place that Mrs. King outlined. That is absolutely possible. And I think it's possible, and it takes work. Yes, it takes us speaking truth to power. It takes us, being open to, making the conflict visible when there is a conflict. It's not easy to get to the beloved community, but the beloved community is a place in which, quite frankly, we all thrive, where people are truly able to be their whole authentic selves, to be apologetic about who we are, our Blackness, about who we are as women, as Black women, as a people. And most importantly, we are in a place and a position where it is equitable. And it is a place where love, because when we think about this word beloved, love is a primary word in here, where love is thriving. But I think that society has gotten away from this idea that it is even possible. And we're somewhat pessimistic, rightfully so. And some would say, when we look at the reality, that even still in 2022, that we're fighting voter suppression laws, that we still on almost a weekly basis are seeing Black and brown bodies gunned down for no reason, unarmed, by police every single week, that we continue to see economic disparities, that we continue to witness gross inequities in our education system. So we see all those things, but what we have to recognize is that when we're bold, when we decide that we're going to fight, and when we decide that we are going to come together and put aside our differences so that we can actually reach the beloved community, that is when we're on the path.
And Monica, can I just add one other thing too? I think it's also important that we learn to approach things not always on the defense, but on the offense. I think a lot of people come to the table ready to fight. I mean, it's like a constant flight. And we have to learn to guard against the energy of those who want to keep the fight going, because that's happening too, infiltration. And so people just at each other, and the very thing that we are all desirous of, even if we don't have clarity on what it exactly means, just in theory though, there are these forces that come and just keep us doing this with each other and get our eyes off of the very thing that we're trying to accomplish. And then it's about the fight. And it's not about the vision and the goal.
And I could, I know you probably want to keep going, Monica, but this
no,
one is
I want you to talk. I want you to talk.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that 100%. And I think we probably, even as people who are in the movement, have to be more real about our own trauma, right? The fact that we're showing up as organizers, leaders with trauma that exists. First of all, we have generational trauma that we as a people deal with every day. But in addition to that, there is specific trauma that some of us come to. Some of us show up in the movement after having gone through a tragedy, which is how we become leaders. Others, because of the communities that we come from, that we've never processed what we have been through. We've never processed some of the challenges that happen even in the movement. You've got people right now who are the face of campaigns and working within certain spaces that have been harmed or have harmed other individuals right in this space that we're all trying to work together. And there really has not been a space designed to bring those individuals to sit down and heal. Exactly. And so how do you lead when you're hurting and you don't even know how to address your own personal pain? And then, it's almost like going to Thanksgiving dinner, knowing that the person who may have assaulted you as a child is going to be there, and the family has not addressed that issue, but everybody expects you to sit there and smile and laugh and have a good time. And then when you have an attitude, they say, what's wrong with you? And we deal with that in our family. So I think even within the movement family, there is some healing that has to happen so that we can be all that we should be to create a beloved community. Because the love that Jotaka that you spoke about, it has to exist within us as well. It can't be something that we teach and don't practice.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, that brings me to this question then. We as women, what are some of the key ways we need to strategize? What are some of the key ways we need to organize and mobilize? Because what Mrs. King talked about, women are the soul of the movement. So what do we need to be doing now when we see, as someone said to me the other day, I feel like I'm living in the 50s and 60s again. How do we organize and mobilize with this new generation of young women like you three?
I think, Jotaka, I want to have you to speak first, because I know both Tamika and I have been a part of something you've been doing, and I know, Tamika, you do a lot of that. But I like to hear some of what Jotaka's thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think as women in this generation, in this moment, we win together, and it goes to a movement that we all are part of. Hashtag Win with Black Women, and just the essence of what that means. I certainly know and believe that every single one of us, particularly as Black women, we have a role to play in this generation, in this moment, as we are dealing with all the struggles that are around us, that we all carry power. All of us, no matter where we are, we carry power, whether it's in our families, whether it's in our church, in our community, whether it's in our social organizations, our sororities, wherever it is, we carry power. But I am absolutely, what I know for sure is that as Black women, we win together. And America wins with us. So I think the first thing that we have to do is to just be connected to each other.
Yeah.
And make sure that we are not only lifting each other up, but making sure that we are constantly pouring into our sisters, supporting our sisters, being an echo chamber for our sisters, being an advocate and a voice in this moment for Black women across America, not only in politics, not only making sure that we have a Black woman who is the vice president of the United States, or a Black woman that's sitting in the Supreme Court, or making sure that we get a Black woman in the U.S. Senate and a Black woman in the governor's house, but making sure that we have Black women in the C-suites of all of these major corporations, that we have Black women that are producing and executive producing and shaping the images that we see in entertainment, that we have Black women that are coaching in sports, that we have Black women who are shaping the music that we are either listening to or we're dancing to, that there are Black women that are in the pulpits that are pouring into our soul, that we as Black women recognize that there is a place and a space for us and our leadership at every single table in this country. And that in this moment, that it is important for us to be bold and unapologetic about not only our desire, but our demand to rightfully take our seats at all tables. And I think in this moment, it's important for us to be connected. It's important for us to not only be bold and to be represented, but it's also important for us to give ourselves individually the grace to make sure that we are also protecting our spiritual, mental, physical peace in the process as well.
And Monica, I just want to add, because I know our time is coming close. I wanted to add to what she just said. I think it's also important for us to understand that of all the groups that you can identify in our country, you know, when we talk about every category, whether you're talking about race, religion, you know, gender, sexual orientation, what have you, the only group that I know of that is the most inclusive is Black women. When we're in a room, we think about the others.
That's right.
When everybody else is in the room, they don't necessarily think about the others.
That's right.
So because we are wired that way, we have the capacity to create a global agenda to address those things that affect us. But at the same time, when the outcomes happen, it benefits everybody. And so I think that's what it's going to take for us to come together and really strategize and come up with a collective agenda to deal with these issues that we are talking about.
Love that quote. When Black women are in the room, we think about the others. Tamika, do you have any final remarks?
You know, as the two of my sisters were speaking, I was thinking about young girls. It just, you know, was coming to me in my heart that these young girls, they are leaders, they are creative, they're bold, they're beautiful, and sometimes overlooked. And I think that if we want to be the organizers that we say we are, we have to do what not just Coretta Scott King did, but let me just say that Dr. Bernice King does it as well, to pour into young women, to take the time, whether it's in a hotel lobby where I'm talking her ear off for 2 hours about all my struggles in life, and she listens and follows up, whether it be showing up in spaces and trying to be a voice of reason, just being available to think through strategy, to process. She's that. And there are so many other women. I think about Cora Masters Berry. I think about Hazel Dukes. I think about just so many women. You mentioned Mignon and Leah Daughtry, and the list goes on of those women who have certainly helped to bring what you see in front of you and Jotaka and me to today. And we have a responsibility to reach to the younger women. And I'm not talking about, you know, the 20-something-year-olds, because we're doing that. I'm talking about the 10-year-olds, the 7-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, these younger girls who know what it is that they need, but they just have not been given platform and a space to be a part of our organizing work. And so at Until Freedom, I'll say this in be done in my organization, we always say that the people who are most impacted have to be at the center of the solution building, that they
Exactly.
have to be the voice in the room. So how can we plan and organize and strategize on behalf of younger people, young women, young girls, if we don't bring them to the table to allow them to have voice in the planning and in the strategizing of what will happen with their lives? I think the more we build young leaders, the better we will be as not just women, but as a society in general. So
And
that's
that's the beloved community approach that she just said.
And I think what's important, as you said, connecting the generations, bridging that gap, because we can learn from the past to focus on what we're doing now, but then to grow to the future. Ladies, you have been amazing. Mrs. Coretta Scott King is smiling down at you and our other participants for what you've brought to us this evening.